Adventist Frontier Mission Stream. My name is Michael Babianco. I'm a recruiter with Adventist Frontier Missions, and we're so happy that you're going to join us today. Today we are interviewing a short-term missionary who is coming to us from the field, from the country of Cambodia in Southeast Asia. Joining us today will be Ryan Bell, short-term missionary who's serving the people of Cambodia. That's actually where I got to serve a couple years ago, so the place where he's serving is close to my heart. And we're so glad you can be here today, Ryan. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be on here today.
Yeah, so tell us, where exactly are you serving in Cambodia? What are you doing? And how long have you been there?
All right, so I am on what is called the Great River Project. It is a project that is based right along the Mekong River. It's about 3.5 hours northeast of Phnom Penh, which is the main city here in Cambodia. This project has been going on for, it's been over 10 years now. And I work with three missionaries here project, the Lewises and the Torados. What do I do here? That is a loaded question. Let's just start with, I got here, my wife and I, we arrived in September of 2020, and we are scheduled to stay here up until July. I am a registered nurse, and my wife is a teacher. We came to fill those roles or to help out in any way possible. So for the most part, we help the career missionaries, and whatever they, whatever projects they have going, we assist them in any way we can.
All right, awesome. So what made you want to get into missions in the first place?
Oh, it had to be about 2013. I met my wife at a evangelistic training program called Arise in Oregon. During this program, they teach you about God and how to grow your relationship with Him and how to share your faith. And I thought, well, what better thing to do with my life than to share my faith with others, especially those who have never heard it before. So missions just seemed like an easy option. It seemed like the only option. So as soon as my wife and I finished school, we decided to look at our options. Who we can go with, and yeah, very simple process, and here we are. We're in the mission field.
Awesome. So how are you enjoying it so far? If you had to grade it from a scale of 1 to 10, where are you at?
Oh, if I had to rate it from 1 to 10, it would probably be an 11. I love the people here. It has been such a great experience to be able to come and serve and to actually teach people about the Bible who have never heard about Christianity. That's something that I never thought I'd be able to do in my life, be able to teach somebody the story of creation and how Jesus was there from the beginning, and He set in motion the plan of redemption ever since the foundation of the earth. And it was so cool to share that here for the first time for somebody who had never heard it before. So yeah, my experience so far has been about an 11.
Wow, that's really awesome to hear. That's really great. So tell me, before you came to the mission field, before you even stepped foot at Adventist Frontier Mission's doorstep, as it were, what were your expectations? What were you thinking you were going to be doing when you got to the mission field?
Okay. So my wife and I, we applied first to the Palawan project. I, as a registered nurse, would be helping out in the clinic up in the mountains, and my wife would be teaching at their school. We had everything lined up. We purchased all of our malaria medication. We got all of our vacations according to Palawan. We did all of our shopping for clothes that we thought we would get ruined on the mountains in Palawan. And we got, when we went to training, we realized that Palawan might not be an option for us. And John Baxter actually pulled us aside and said, you know what? We have a couple other options because Palawan's not looking like a good one right now. So he mentioned Cambodia. And he said, you could probably use your medical training there and your teaching training. So I was like, well, that seems like a good option. And God brought us this far. So wherever God leads, we're going to go. So we came to Cambodia, still with the expectation that we would be using our field of expertise. Upon getting here, we realized that in the mission field, you don't do what you expect to be doing, you do what needs to be done. So when we got here, the Lewises, they have lots of projects on the go. Josh is a jack of all trades, and he's not shying away from any project. So I became an amateur electrician, plumber, architect, drywaller, roofer, pretty much anything in order to build for neighbors, for church members, and to help finish some projects even on his own house.
Wow.
This was actually pretty cool for me because I had some training in, I guess I grew up on a farm. So I had training in all kinds of these areas. I've actually done even some trucking for Josh, bringing some loads of dirt to build up his land so that in the rainy season, it's not underwater. And yeah, other than that, my expectations, I thought I would be using my nursing knowledge a lot. And though it does come up quite a few times, we've had about 4 seminars now put on for the villages here in Joe, as well as the ones in Tanout. And they have been wonderful successes. We've had between 30 and 70 people attending each one. But I'm not able to give the seminars because I'm not fluent in their language. So I usually end up writing the seminar, and one of the local nurses will give the seminar. I've actually been able to do a couple minor surgeries, assisting the other career missionary nurse, Carly. We've done a minor plastic surgery on somebody's finger who had an infection. So they have an infection that's carried by fish here that gets underneath the nail bed. And once it gets in there, it starts to eat away at their flesh. And if it's not treated, it can continue down the finger and pretty much just eat kind of like leprosy would. So this guy had this infection for over a month, and he didn't like doctors at all. So he, as a last resort, he came to the Adventist church in Tanout because he heard from one of his friends that some of us had medical training. So he came to church and he showed us his finger, which looked terrible. And we looked at it and we're like, oh, have you gone to the doctor? He's like, no, I'm afraid of doctors. Like, I'm afraid of what they might do to me or they might mistreat me, which is actually common here in Cambodia, that doctors will mistreat, especially the Cham people in the hospital. They won't give them the proper care that they deserve. So Carly and I, we talked about it, and we consulted a doctor in the States, and we thought, you know what, we can help this guy. We can perform a surgery where we can remove the infection and help this guy retain most of his finger. So that's what we did. We set up an operating room in the kitchen of the Torado's house. We duct taped a light to the fan. We turned the fan off and duct taped a light up there so we could see. and we sterilized our tools by boiling them in a pot. And then we started our surgery. We had a couple sterile drapes that people had donated to missionaries in the past. And we had an old dentist chair, a folding dentist chair that we got to sit our patient on. We'll call him Boo, which means uncle. And we sat him down. We started the surgery. We had the other doctor from the States on the phone watching the surgery, and we were consulting him every time that we had a question. Okay, where do we numb his finger? Okay, where is the proper place to cut? How should we cut the finger so we can close it again? And after about 3 hours during surgery, he maintained most of his finger. We sewed him up, and now it is completely closed and healed up just perfectly. Praise God.
Wow.
So
praise the Lord.
Yeah, and a cool story with him is that was the first time he had come to church to ask us for help for his finger. And he's actually been coming to church ever since. So praise God for that.
Wow, that's amazing. Praise the Lord that he's coming to church. That's fantastic. So not only did you go to a different country than you were expecting, you had to get, I assume, different vaccinations, or at least prepare different clothing, it sounds like. But now you had to come to a different work situation, a different job. So it sounds like your nursing skills are still useful, but what percentage of the time are you using your nursing, you'd say?
With our seminars, preparation and delivery, and the small surgeries, as well as the education, a lot of people will come to church and they're seeking help for some ailment. They have some pain. So often we will spend some time after church just talking with them, educating them on health principles, and potentially giving them some medication that can help. So I would say with all of that put together, maybe 10% of the time would be using my nursing skills, and the rest of the time would be using skills that I've acquired living on the farm, or just skills that God is gifting me with as we go. So yeah, 90% of the time it's kind of just flying by the seat of my pants and doing what needs to be done.
Yeah, so you might say it's only 10%, but you've already mentioned how that maybe you would think a small percentage has already helped bring someone to church. So it's still a critical part of your ministry. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. Okay, so you've talked about your expectations in terms of your professional things of what you've done in terms of your career. What were your expectations in terms of witnessing, in terms of how God would use you?
So I might have had an unrealistic expectation on how easy it would be to learn another language and to be able to share the gospel in another language. It's not as easy as open a book and read a few terms and then just tell them about the Bible. Learning another language, especially one that doesn't have the same roots as English, is proving to be very difficult. And even just learning enough language to get by, to acquire supplies that we need, has been, quite a process. I would say I have acquired quite a bit of language, but not enough to have any deep spiritual conversations. So I was expecting to come here and be able to share the gospel with many people. But in reality, people don't want to hear the gospel unless you have a relationship with them. And you need a relationship. You need speech in order to build a relationship. So a lot of the ministry that I and my wife do is through the career missionaries. We will go visiting with them. We will ask questions through them. We will go and just hang out with people and use them kind of as our translators. Whenever I give Bible studies or give sermons at church, it's always through Josh translating. So I'm able with a lot of people. It wasn't taking on the same form as I thought it might be. And I thought that every day I would be going out to people's homes and, sharing with them about the Bible. But a lot of my days are spent doing building projects. And I had to kind of take a step back one day and be like, is this useful for ministry? And why, yes, of course it is. We built a kitchen and a bathroom for a church member who was living in her parents' house for the last 40 years of her life. And now she's able to move into her own house with her 3 daughters. We helped finish a bedroom and a bathroom for a neighbor whose son had just come home from the hospital with finishing his chemotherapy. So they had a more sterile environment for him to live in. We've done other building projects for neighbors so that they can have a more clean environment to live in. So even though it's not sharing about the Bible every day, it still has a big impact. And I just had to take a step back and realize God is using me, even though it's not in the way that I thought it would be.
That's very interesting. Even with your limited language, though, have you found that you have made friends even with people that don't speak English?
Oh, so right when I first got here, my goal was to learn some songs in Khmer and to be able to use those in church, to sing with kids. So the very first song that I learned was "This Is the Day," because it's a very repetitive song, fairly easy to get the words. So I learned that song, and I had a horrible accent while singing it, and I realized that. But I wanted to try it out and sing it with one of the locals. So we have our landlords live right next to us. It's actually in the same house pretty much, but it's separated by a wall. And they would hang out in front of the house often in the afternoons, in the evening. So I went out in the afternoon about a month after we arrived here, and I asked him through Google Translate if I could sing a song for him, because I hadn't acquired enough language to be able to know how to ask, can I sing a song? But I knew the song. So I asked him through Google Translate, and I said, oh, can I sing a song for you? And he's like, oh, yes, for sure. I would love to listen to a song. So I started playing on my little ukulele and singing Niku Chiet Ngai, Niku Chiet Ngai. And I sang "This Is the Day" for him. At the end of it, he's like, you sing about God. That's really interesting. Do you have a Bible that's translated into Khmer? I said, well, I don't have one right now, but I can sure get one for you, like, as soon as possible. So he's actually been coming to church regularly since that time. We gave him a Bible. We've been doing Bible studies with him. He hasn't come the last few weeks because it's dry season and he has a lot of rubber fields. He's quite worried about his rubber fields catching on fire. So he will spend a lot of time out in his rubber fields lately. But yeah, very cool to have that experience, that even in my rudimentary knowledge of the language, I was able to tell him about God, or just through a small song.
Wow, that's amazing. That's praise the Lord. So let me get this straight. You're not necessarily doing what you expected to do in the first place with your profession. You're doing something else. You know some of the language, but you can't speak a ton of the language. You can get around some, but you're still learning about the culture and things like that. And yet God is still using you.
For sure, yes. Which means that It's the age-old statement that people always tell you: God doesn't call the qualified; He qualifies the called. He doesn't use necessarily all of our strengths, but He uses our weaknesses to show His strengths. So I'm really realizing that here in the mission field, that God doesn't want everything that we know. He wants what we don't know so that He can show what He does know.
Wow. Praise the Lord. Okay, you talked a little bit about language learning, and I'm curious, are there any good, funny language learning stories that you have where you may have made some funny mistakes that you'd be willing to share?
Oh, well, yeah, there's lots of them, but being able to think of them on the spot is the difficult part. They have a lot of words that sound the exact same in English because we don't have an ear for them, or I haven't developed an ear for them yet. So the only example that I can think of right now is the word for lamb and the word for blood. So I've been giving sermons on the sanctuary in church, and we've been going through every article in the sanctuary one by one each week. And the word for blood is chan, and the word, I think I'm getting that wrong, but the word for blood and the word for lamb sound the exact same in English. So as I was saying, the blood of the lamb and the lamb's blood is perfect, Josh had to translate. It sounded like the exact same word, even to him, who has known the language for 20 years. He said it was difficult for him to be able to say that word back to back.
Wow.
And when I memorized a short sermon, so they have words that are speedle here. The amount that you elongate the word changes the word entirely. So the word for water is tak, and the word for table is tak. So just elongating it a little bit makes it a different word. So I was talking about the table, or I was talking about the laver that was filled with water, but apparently I was talking about a table that was that had no water in it because it was a table instead of water. So yeah, lots of things that are very difficult for native English speakers, but to them it sounds like completely different words.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about a little bit of the local culture. I assume you're going to the market once a week, once a month? You're going locally to shop?
Yeah, so there is what they call a wet market about 20 minutes away from us. By wet market, it just has everything out in the open. They have live fish. They have meat kind of just sitting out on tables. So they kind of have everything that you could possibly buy sitting out. Nothing is refrigerated or covered. And you can just go collect what you want and then bring it back home. So we will go there once a week to get all of our produce. It's funny because we're the only white people that walk through this market. And I tend to stand out like a giant, being 6'3" and everyone else being 5 foot or less. So whenever I walk through the market, people notice. And they know that we don't eat meat. And sometimes people will, as we're walking by, they'll say, "Those are the people that don't eat meat. Don't try and sell meat to them." So we've had quite a reputation, but acquiring our produce throughout the week, and because it's in such close proximity to the meat and to flies, we come home and we wash everything in bleach water because it's we don't want to mess with any types of diseases that might be carried by those flies. So yeah, we go once a week to the market, bring all of our produce back. It takes about a whole day to wash it, to be able to put everything away. So it's quite a process, but it's actually a good way to connect with the locals too. We have some sellers that we go back to time and time again, and they love to see us. And some of them are actually interested in the Bible and potentially getting Bible studies in the future. So yes, even going to the market is a way of ministry.
Wow, that's fantastic. Have you found that you have picked up any new tastes for fruits or things that you weren't expecting to like, such as durian, perhaps?
So my taste for durian is about the same as it always was. I have a strong aversion to that fruit. But there is one fruit that's similar to durian, jackfruit. It's a large fruit, got lots of spines on it, kind of like durian. And when I first got here and tasted it, I didn't like it at all. It kind of had an odd flavor, odd aftertaste. And after a while, because it's so plentiful here, I just ate it more and more. And now I love it. We put it in smoothies, we cut it up, we put it in the freezer, and yeah, it's actually a very enjoyable fruit. That on top of all of the wonderful fruits that I loved before coming here are here bountifully now. And so cheap, we can acquire all the fruits that we could ever want here, especially mango. It is mango season now, and we currently have in our possession probably about 10 kilos of mangoes, of which we will try and eat all of ourselves, but if we can't finish them all, we'll cut them up and put them in the freezer and then put them in smoothies later on. So some mangoes were my favorite fruit coming here, and they still are my favorite fruit.
You know, they say the same thing about durian that you just mentioned about jackfruit, that if you keep eating it, you stop having an aversion to it. So maybe you should keep trying.
Oh, it's so difficult when you can't even swallow it the first time. So maybe if I'm able to chew and swallow durian for the first time, then from then on, I'll just end up loving it.
All right. So what have you found is one of the most difficult or challenging things? And that can be physically, that can be spiritually, mentally. What's one of the most challenging things that you've faced as a missionary out there in your first year?
The most difficult things kind of have changed and morphed. Like first when I got here, it was expectations. That was the most difficult thing, expecting to do one thing and then doing something completely different. Now that we've been here for 6 or 7 months so far, I would say the language barrier was the most difficult thing as you're learning and wanting to converse with people so badly and to tell them all of the wonderful things that you have in your heart and your mind, and you want to tell them all these things, but you're limited. All you can say are some very simple words, or you really have something that you need to tell them to be able to do, but you can't. And I would say that's the most difficult thing throughout our time here as missionaries. Getting into hot season, I would say one of the most difficult things right now is finding ways to escape the heat. My wife and I, we freeze water bottles. Thank God we do have a freezer, a fridge freezer. It's a small little fridge freezer. We freeze water bottles, and then we at night we wrap them in t-shirts, and then we hug them as we fall asleep. So this is us falling asleep with a frozen water bottle. And yeah, we freeze grapes, we freeze all kinds of fruit just so that we can eat something cool during the day, because the heat and the humidity is, yeah, one of the more difficult things to endure right now. But as a whole, I would say the language barrier is the most difficult. Just wanting to be able to converse with people and not being able to.
So in your last couple months, you said you're leaving in June or July, I think you said.
Mhm.
What are you hoping to accomplish, or what are your goals for your last couple months?
My goal by the time I leave will be to memorize a shorter sermon. I have given kind of an introductory sermon in Khmer a few weeks ago, but my goal by the end is to memorize a short sermon and to be able to give it in their language. So it's going to take lots of work, memorization of words that I don't even know the meaning of. But I think to be able to give a sermon in their language to where they can understand without a translator is going to be something that will touch their hearts, and it will something that can challenge me, and God can work through me through that challenge.
Okay. So last question. You are now sitting in front of every person who's ever thought of being a missionary, short-term, long-term career. What would you want to tell anyone who's ever thought about being a missionary? What would be your advice?
My advice is you're probably making one of the best decisions if you decide to become a missionary. Don't expect that you will be the same person when you start to be a missionary as when you come out of it. Because even as a short-term missionary, your entire character changes. And it changes even slowly to where you don't realize it. So don't expect to be the same person coming out as you are going in. And don't expect to be doing the things that that you first signed up to do.
Yeah, the 3 rules of being a missionary: flexibility, flexibility, and flexibility.
And flexibility.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Expect to learn new things.
Thank you, Ryan, so much for taking some time in your morning for sharing with us about your experience with Adventist Frontier Missions. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone who's been watching. I would invite you to join us on Facebook. You can also join us on Instagram. We have 2 accounts, Adventist Frontier Missions, as well as our student missionary account, AFM Student Missions. And if you'd like to contact us, you can send us an email at service@afmonline.org. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.